Are you talking shift? We are. It's time for the We're Talking Shift podcast. Now. Here to talk shift, Loree Bischoff. We're Talking Shift.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the We're Talking Shift podcast, where my guest du jour and I talk shift because the antidote to feeling stuck begins in our minds with a shift in our thinking. And that shift often means that you've got to take some action, and you might even have to really go rogue. At some point, the guests that I interview have gone rogue and made a shift that altered the course of their life. And many of them now help others shift. Talking about shifting and going rogue and how that can change our lives for the better is something that I am very passionate about sharing with you, in the hopes that you too will be inspired to go rogue when you need to make some shifts happen in your own life. Today's guest is someone who shares my passion for cultivating healthy, happy relationships. Haley Hallock is a certified consulting hypnotherapist, an advanced Psych K facilitator, and a Psychology Today preferred therapist. Haley is also the owner of Stitched Head and Heart Project in Cave Creek, Arizona, and a relationship restorer. Hello, Haley. I am so happy that we could finally get together and have this conversation. So welcome to We're Talking Shift.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, Loree.
I think I want to just lay the groundwork here for a second before we dive into our subject, because I think this is kind of funny. I'm gonna back it up for the listeners. Haley and I had offices next door to each other in Cave Creek, Arizona, for like 2 years, I think.
Oh my goodness, I think it was.
Yeah. And so between her busy schedule and mine, it's like we never had more than like a minute conversation. I mean, so for 2 years, right? I'd see my glass door, I could see her whiz by on the way to hers and whiz out, and I could see her clients coming in and out. And then inevitably, as soon as one of your clients would show up, I could hear like 5 minutes of laughter. And I'm like, what is going on over there? They are having way too much fun. I feel like I need to come up with a reason to book a session with Haley, because it sounds really fun over there. The walls were kind of thin. You can't hear each other talking or anything, but I could hear laughter. So I just think it's really funny. And then, so we were like ships passing in the night. And then when we moved away from Arizona and we made our Wyoming residence our primary. So now I'm 1,100 miles away, and we are going to have the longest conversation that we've ever had.
I know, right? Is that so funny? Yeah, that office space was so quaint and such a wonderful introduction to the community in Cave Creek for me. I mean, having you and all of our neighbors there, I mean, everybody was just all kind of like-minded. And so it was such a great space for me to really jump into the community. But yes, we were forever whizzing by. And as much as I deal with some of the most intense and horrible shadow areas of life, I am a huge proponent of laughter. Joy, I think, joy and gratitude can kill any negative energy. And so I definitely like to bring my clients into a space where it's like, you know what, this is uncomfortable. Nobody really likes to air dirty laundry. Let's have a laugh. In fact, neuroscience says that our brains are primed to learn if we start with laughter.
Yes, I love it. I have the same mentality about it. I always have to bring humor and laughter into our sessions, whenever possible, because of that very reason. So thank you for sharing that, because I agree. I think it's so important on so many levels, and it's, part of that is just obvious. It just feels good. But there's all of this chemical stuff that happens when you're laughing and having fun. There's this, your body's like a chemical factory. So I think that sometimes people don't even know that they're actually manufacturing, wonderful chemicals, healing chemicals, feel-good chemicals, in your body when you're laughing and having fun. So I'm really glad you said that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to talk about relationships. I know that this is a major focus for you. It's a big focus for both of us. So I'm really excited for you to share and talk about your approach and your experience. And I guess to start, I'd like to find out, what got you so passionate about what you do in working with people and couples.
Actually, it was probably, it's just so funny. I was actually speaking with my father about a month or two ago, and he goes, honey, there's a phrase. It says, doctor, heal thyself. And I was like, what does that mean, Dad? He's always giving me these colloquials that they go way above my head, And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, when it comes to relationships, you're really good at them academically. And I was like, oh, burn.
Wow.
So what brought me to relationships was a deep passion for nobody to have to go through the divorce that I went through separation. Mm-hmm. So knowing that feeling and knowing how intense that feeling was is the reason I'm so passionate about keeping couples together, because I truly believe that if you make that commitment and if you have the right professional help, you can get through anything. And I believe that because I've seen that. So the couples recovery was really just kind of a divine download. And part of that being the empath, I guess, that I am, was to go through that process of pain in order to be able to go, okay, what did I personally need to shift? What was out of order? So that's kind of where it actually came at the most odd time during separation for me to have all these couples coming in. I mean, it was really, I worked through a lot of my own stuff of feeling unworthy and going, why now, God? And how am I certified, or how am I
qualified?
How am I going to, qualified? Thank you, Loree. To be able to do this if behind the scenes, I don't have it perfect. Mm-hmm. And I just got a very clear, from God, it was very clear, Haley, it doesn't matter whether or not you got it perfect, you know what it feels like to be on the other side of this. So the passion grew there. There was a lot of shifting for myself and realizing how I need to just show up within my own personal accountability and how I was co-creating that negative pattern and cycle. And so it came from one of the darkest places in my life to be as passionate as I am about couples. So that the couples intensive, I've been working with couples for about 3 years.
Nice. Yeah. Isn't it interesting how so often that's how things play out, where people that are passionate and driven to help others, it is a lot of times a result of them going through that same type of darkness themselves and coming out the other side. And now it's like all you want to do is share what you've learned and be able to demonstrate and help others to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a way. There's new and more things possible for you than you may not be able to see right now.
Yep, absolutely. Previous to that, the practice was pretty much a one-on-one kind of practice where I used holistic approaches like hypnotherapy and Psych-K, and then my education would be from ASU in psychology. So it's more of a one-on-one, and I would do on occasion couples if I had already done the one-on-one with one of them, with one of the partners, and then from the download of the couples recovery, from there it kind of moves out into bringing the kiddos in, because there's a lot of shifting and stuff that needs to happen within the familial dynamic. And so then I've got all the kiddos in there, which is such a pleasure, because I had always said I wasn't going to work with kids, and I was so wrong, like I really believe God is up forever just going, hey, I've got something for you. So it's been a huge blessing that I didn't see coming, but yeah, it definitely came from an interesting space.
Yeah. So I would love for you to explain for listeners that may not be familiar with it what Psych K is. But before we do that, we get too far away from it, I wanted to ask real quick.
Okay.
So was the separation, the divorce that you mentioned, was that part of sort of one of your going rogue experiences in life, or was there something else?
Oh, we're on the same frequency, Loree.
Uh-huh.
When you had mentioned that, I was going to say, as I think about this, I think I've gone rogue my entire life. In fact, if I were a part of the X-Men, that would be like my go-to.
Right.
Yes, I do believe it was. I think that sometimes our greatest weapon, our greatest ability or superpower, whatever you want to call it, can be our greatest Achilles heel, right? It can be our biggest weakness. Mm-hmm. And so my stubborn tenacity, my willingness and my drive and my ambition and all of those kinds of things kind of it worked in my professional life. It worked to rear my kiddos and help them to be successful and wonderful little citizens, and in friendships. But it doesn't work. It didn't work in my intimate life. Mm-hmm. So I did have to kind of learn the hard way. And I would say, yes, that was definitely a going rogue moment. It was a lesson for sure.
Mm-hmm. So the going rogue part was when you had to decide that you were going to divorce, that you were going to split up. Was that the thing?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that I was kind of going and operating as an independent party the vast majority of my relationship. So I think that was kind of a part of it. And then I think that letting go of a relationship that, this is coming from the person who is all about stay together, right? Uh-huh. But mind you have to have two willing parties, and those two parties have to be willing to get professional, assistance. So that was not my dynamic. So yes, it was me having to go, okay, so is this serving me if I am willing to grow, but my partner isn't? And so, yeah, I kind of had to make a decision as to whether I wanted to continue to operate in the energetic space that I was in, or if I wanted to, continue to be, I always say with my couples, it's really difficult to have a seeker and a complacent in the same dynamic. Mm-hmm. And I was seeking, and I was trying to grow, and I was trying to evolve, and that was not fitting the dynamic. But I have my accountability. I can't say that I was in any way, shape, or form not responsible for some of that. So,
sure.
So yes, it was definitely a going rogue, and not an easy one. I'll tell you that.
No, I mean, it usually isn't, especially when you have children involved. It's very difficult. And then, mm-hmm. there's always the possibility that the families are weighing in, and, whatever your families and your beliefs are come into play. So it can be very complicated and very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And just something that I feel like if we have the right information, and if you have, I believe every couple comes together and with the greatest of intentions. They truly do. And we really do mean those words that we say, till death do us part kind of thing. And it's natural. Entropy is a law of the universe. Like mm-hmm. everything degrades. And I think that with relationships, we have this idea that it's like, okay, we get married, and then it's like happily ever after just continues to happen. And it doesn't. No. We have to maintenance. You can't work out up into your goal, body, and then go, okay, we're good, right? Or you can't do your personal development work and go like, oh, I feel better, and so you stop doing it. And with relationships, we can't prioritize, a variety of other things before that relationship. That has to be maintenance as well. If we maintenance our car, we got to maintenance our marriage or our partnership or relationship. So, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. We were just talking about that about 2 weeks ago. That is one of the exact things I was talking about. So completely agree. It's like like you said, you can't just, once you get to a certain place, you can't assume that things are going to stay like they are. They don't. They actually start to go the other way if you don't manage it, maintain it, grow it, nurture it, all the things that you do like you would for your for your kids or your pet or your plant or your garden or your car.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, the couples recovery is just bringing us back to that original commitment and creating an environment where there is less emotional subjectivity within the couples, because oftentimes there's a lot of there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of years there's a lot of trespasses that we're desperately trying to get on the other side of, but we continue to see the negative pattern repeat itself, and so it's like we just get bruised over and over and over again. And so my goal is with my couples is to create a level of objectivity. It's three people in a room trying to save an entity, that entity being the relationship. And so what do we got to do? All three of us, we're three brilliant people. What do we have to do in order to make this thing regenerate? And
Right.
So that's the main objective of the couples recovery.
That's awesome. Yeah. I like the way you refer to it as an entity. That's really, it just kind of gives you a different perspective. I like that. Do you want to explain real quick before I lose that what Psych K is? Is that something then, I know what it is, but I know a lot of our listeners may not. And is that something that you still use in your practice?
So Psych K is just a way of reprogramming the subconscious on in a quick, it's time efficient, it's fast, it's fun, there's great ease with it. I actually got into Psych K as I was going through my education, and it's actually what kind of shifted me towards the holistic side of things. So that is the foundation of me starting my practice and deciding to go more into the subconscious reprogramming, because I believe that if we have a subconscious belief, that regardless of what we try to push will consciously, that subconscious belief is always going to run up against that. So we'll find ourselves in the same kind of relationships, the same kind of patterns, the same things that we're trying to avoid. So Psych K, psych being psychology, K being a kinesthetic component. So you use muscle testing in order to determine and establish what we do believe and what we do not believe. And then we create belief statements, things that we desire, and we check and see whether or not we actually believe those things on a subconscious level. And in the case that we do, awesome, way to go subconscious. In the case that we don't, then we go ahead and we go through what Psych K calls a balance, which is just the methodology, and you use your kinesthetic, you use your body in order to reprogram the belief, and then go ahead and post-test that statement, and where it was a no previously, it'll be a yes. And so the subconscious will literally, I say the subconscious is like a 4-year-old. It will jump on board. It is there to support you. It is your greatest coach and advocate, but again, like I said earlier, it can be your greatest adversary as well, right? If we're programming it, or if we had it, our subconscious programmed as a child in a negative way, then it will just run tape. It'll just continue those negative cycles. But if you treat it as if it is your greatest advocate, if you rewire those thoughts, they change our behavior. They change our emotions, which then change our behaviors, which then change our habits, which then change our life. So Psych K is a theory and practice created by Rob Williams. And Dr. Bruce Lipton, the gentleman who wrote Biology of Belief, is a huge proponent of it. And so I know they have a huge event coming up. I can always tell when they have events because I get a lot of calls for Psych K, because I think YouTube kind of shuffles all of that information through, and then it gets kind of ping-ponged over in my direction. So Psych K was the foundation, of my business, and when I was doing one-on-ones. I sometimes use Psych K with So with the couples recovery, you have to do your own individual session every week. It's an intensive, so each person does their individual session, and we do a couples session. So you get to spend 3 amazing hours with me a week for 4 weeks, uncovering all the gunk. And so we use Psych-K. I'm kind of open to anything. I'm one of those people who is throw everything at the wall and see what sticks kind of person. Let's try to, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a combination of things. But using Psych-K to uproot the beliefs that a person has about their partner, holy cow, Loree. That is a phenomenal, miraculous change where you take the emotional response of, the trespass, whatever it might be by your spouse. If you take the emotional intensity, the sting out of it, it's a really quick process. So I highly recommend Psych-K. Although, some people, it's a little, it can be a little progressive. And so for some people, they just prefer to do talk therapy. Mm-hmm. I'm okay with whatever.
Yeah. You have to be able to, deliver something and coach around something that they're going to be receptive to and not resist.
Right. Right.
But I love what you said about that. I have been super interested in Psych-K for some time. I read Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief about 10 years ago, and I was immediately
wow.
a huge fan. Uh-huh. Yeah, so I not only read the book, and then I got the book on DVDs then 10 years ago, so I could listen to them in my car too, because I just couldn't get enough. So I'm a massive fan of Bruce Lipton, and I just and it's amazing the things that we can do that people don't realize are really in our biology, and our beliefs are interconnected. One results from the other, and you know what I mean, and one promotes the other. So it's pretty interesting. So as far as, all right, let's talk a little bit about then your program. So you just talked somewhat about, what it consists of. So what do you find are some of the most common areas of trespass within relationships that show up when you're working with somebody?
Well, I mean, it varies. I guess the most common, the ones that are most ubiquitous among couples would be your infidelities, whether they be, I break down infidelities in a different way. I think that infidelities don't necessarily have to be physical. They can be emotional. It could be financial. It could be even a prioritization of the children over the couple. Mm-hmm. Which creates an unhealthy dynamic, because because without the couple, the family dynamic doesn't exist. So that has to come first. So I would call that an infidelity. I think that when you just use that as an umbrella term, it helps to understand that none is more worse than the other, right? So it kind of equalizes everything. And then that way we kind of, it's kind of like taking the sting out of something, right? Yeah. So that, because I know from a societal stigma would be that physical infidelity is one of the worst for men, whereas in a heterosexual couple, or the masculine energy, I guess I could say, for the new age. And then emotional for the feminine or the female energy in the relationship, that can be like the biggest trespass. So I try to equalize everything, right? Just kind of like old school Bible, everything is, all sin is equal. So we go through and we see a variety of different infidelities. A huge thing, Loree, miscommunication. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably, infidelities and miscommunication are probably the biggest. I mean, if I look at, because I kind of wrote a list here, the Virgo in me was kind of doing a little, okay, right? Yeah. Okay, let's be prepared about everything. But really, I think if I just scratch the notes, it's infidelities and miscommunication. one of the, from a more Christian standpoint, how we were talking about the biology of belief, well, there's a gal named, are you familiar with Dr. Caroline Leaf?
I don't think so.
Oh my gosh, I have to send you her stuff. I mean, if you're not Christian, you just get past the Christian stuff. I actually just saw her at our church yesterday, and amazing. She believes the same thing, that we're not imprisoned by our biology, but rather we can change things via our thoughts. And so she was kind of discussing. She discusses a lot about the male and female brain because she's a neuroscientist.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so did you say Carolyn Miss, M-Y-S-S?
No, it's Leaf, L-E-A-F.
Okay, got it. All right, just want to make sure.
I'll send you her stuff.
Okay.
So, but she talks about the difference between communication with the masculine or male brain and then the female brain, mm-hmm. and how they communicate in different ways, how they receive information in different ways, and how that can create a huge amount of miscommunication just because our brains don't operate the same way.
Definitely.
Like one of the huge proponents is she uses the example of the husband. Now we're just talking about a traditional heterosexual relationship here, but I work with all kinds of couples. So I'm open to everything. But the male coming home or the masculine energy coming home and not wanting to talk, but going back into the space of needing to go into their cave. And it's because men and women we speak the same amount of words in a day, but we use, women spread theirs out throughout the day, and men use the vast majority of theirs at work, and they have a little bit after, like, say, 6 p.m., after dinner. So she just talks about how there's two totally different processing within the brain and how the behaviors express themselves. And so, miscommunication is huge. And one of the things that I use with the couples recovery is I will go through and I'll break down your Myers-Briggs, your love languages. Core predictors of success is something that I created myself, and then a psychometric called the Big Five. So what I do is I kind of analyze the difference between the couple and where they can bridge the gap on their communication.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. It's so interesting. I did an event, 2007, I think, so about 12 years ago, and my keynote speaker that I had was John Gray, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And and I remember him talking about that, the different, that's why we brought him in, was for the whole concept of teaching the women at the event that, we communicate differently than men do. And and it was so interesting, the things that he shared with everybody. But it was really useful to me, too, because a quick story, my husband traveled every single week for work for years. And so I would drop him off at the airport and pick him up at the airport. Well, after being gone for a few days, I would pick him up, and I would be like, I would want to talk. I would want him to share with me everything, every like hour, everything he ate, everything he did, every person he talked to. I wanted to hear it all because I was interested. I just wanted to share.
Oh my God,
and then I wanted,
so cute.
And I wanted, right. I wanted him to ask me, like, well, what's been going on with you, and ask me kind of all the same things, right? And so inevitably, I would pick him up, and I would be all excited, and he would get in the car, and then he would like be silent, and I'd ask a question, and it'd be like, not rude or anything, but just like one or two answers, not very much, and I'd be like, well, what the hell? I mean, I'd be so deflated, you know what I mean?
Right.
But then I learned from, other readings and from John and stuff like that, that, okay, it's not that he doesn't want to talk to me. It's just that he doesn't want to talk right now. It's just, so it was a timing issue. And then so I started to pay attention to that, manage my expectations so that I no longer had those expectations. That way I wouldn't be disappointed when I picked him up. I would just be like, the poor guy is spent. He has nothing left to give. So How about I just chill, think my own awesome thoughts, and then when he's ready, we'll chat, which was usually, several hours later over a glass of wine or something. Then he had time, to compose himself and get his thoughts together and rest his weary brain, and then we could talk. So it's a very real thing, that the communication styles. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And then another thing that using I don't know if you're familiar, but using the psychometric of the Myers-Briggs, there is, they basically work on a spectrum, 100% introversion versus extroversion, and 100% intuition, and then it goes, the other end of the spectrum would be sensing, and then feeling versus thinking, and then judging versus perceiving. And then you get your own percentage within those spectrums, and I can kind of go, okay, and oftentimes, but not always, men are thinkers and women are feelers. I think we all know that, and that's not always. I do have men that are feelers, which is, and I think I've had a total maybe 2 women that are thinkers. But the way they process information is to come to a solution, and women are just trying to process the emotion. How often do I hear in the office between couples, I'm just trying to vent from the woman, and the man goes, I'm confused. I thought you came with a problem, and I'm trying to fix it. Yes. And it's like, oh, you're so emotionally daft. Why don't you understand that I want to get this out of me? Yeah. So I kind of try to teach, and that doesn't necessarily, it's not specific to sex per se, but I try to kind of teach, okay, well, this person is, let's say, 75% thinking. They are going to want, their natural go-to is going to be to solve the problem. So I teach that person how to pause, just take a big pause, and listen. Practice listening. Whereas, like, say, for an extroverted feeler, somebody who wants to create a resolve and wants to talk out the feelings and needs that feeling to be satiated, and there needs to be a resolve, like, okay, you also take a pause and figure out, take your accountability. What's your accountability here? Are you asking for help, or are you venting? Yeah. Are you prefacing that? Are you starting out, I'm just venting? Are you saying, I need help with the solution? I think that is that communication component, like you just said with your husband, like, you can create some level of compassion. It's not even about you. It's about the fact that he's spent, Yeah. Yeah. And I think that when we reframe those things, but you use it with these psychometrics, it creates that I'm all about creating objectivity. Subjectivity puts us in a space where we're defensive and we're in our emotion and we can't see the forest for the trees. So if I go, hey, your spouse is an ENFJ. So they are an extroverted feeler, extroverted intuition, a feeler, and a judger. You can change some of these things, but you can't. That's like saying, well, I want your eyes to be brown instead of blue. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't do that. That's just not, that's unreasonable. So it kind of helps the couples to understand, oh, okay, well, if my husband's an INTJ, he has an engineer brain. All INTJs are engineers, I swear. Find one that's not. But they're wonderful problem solvers, and actually they are really good when you give them the information in an Excel spreadsheet of how they need to treat their spouse. They input all those little components, and they go, okay, this is how I do this. Right. It might not feel organic, but at least they're trying, So that's what the psychometrics are for, and also just because I'm a Virgo and I like to geek out a little bit with the compatibility.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But so really, I mean, these are just the most awesome tools to help people create an understanding of how the other person is thinking and processing and how they move through the world and, how they are within the relationship. And if you cannot get yourself to think beyond, that everybody is automatically going to think and process and respond like you do, you're going to be miserable.
Very frustrated. Very frustrated.
Yeah, you will always be disappointed because it's completely, unrealistic and unattainable for for everyone else to be processing information and thinking and feeling exactly like you are. And so, I think especially between the male brain and the female brain, it's really important. There's some fundamental differences. And man, once you understand it, it's like, oh, now I get you. I got it.
Right.
And it's so freeing, and you just, right? It's freeing, and then you can actually feel like, oh, I like you so much more now. Right? I mean, I always loved you, but now I like you even more because I get you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I have quite a few long-standing. So from a scientific standpoint, there's a few places within the timeline of a marriage that you have pressure points. Like when you have kids, it would be a pressure point. When the kids leave the house, so on and so forth. So a lot of my couples are empty nesters, recent empty nesters, because that's just the demographic up here in Cape Creek. That's just where it's at. Not to say that I don't do the pre-marriage and all that stuff, but the vast majority. And you know what I find, Loree, is they're like, you know what? That exactly what you said. I have not even known my partner and who they truly are, like as an individual. This entire time, I've been with this person for over 2 decades. And I didn't even know who they were as a person. I like this person, like, a lot. Now that I know that I've been sitting there trying to go, one of the things I always say is don't try to get blood from a stone. It's a stone. It's a waste of your time, Instead go, okay, you're a stone, and what do I need to do in order to love you and your individuality? And so with those psychometrics, they kind of have the ability to go, wow, okay, so that makes sense. So I provide them at the end of the couple's recovery kind of a full-on, certificate of completion and what I would call like a book of, your how-to, like the book that you should have gotten in the beginning of like how we get through marriage and with our own individual customized versions of ourselves and our unique relationships. So it's like, here's where you vary, here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses, here's how to get back to that state of happiness that you were when you left. And they go through that process, and by the end of the intensive, they're laughing at each other's differences, whereas before it was, first week, I'm screaming at this person to be different or to act different or whatever it might be. So, right. Yeah, it's a really cool process. Yeah,
it's like each wants the other to keep showing up different. And and again, I mean, how unfair.
Right.
Number one. But, and I wonder, do you find that with, for example, your empty nesters, do you find that when they're saying, I've like all of a sudden I don't even know this person, and then, they work through things with you, and by the end of the session the program, things are great or much better, and they're laughing. Do you find that they have a realization that there are things that were there in the beginning that they just like lost sight of and forgot about, and then they just couldn't find their way back? Or is it stuff they just never even knew from the get-go?
I would say both, Loree. Okay. Absolutely both. Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think that, yes, maybe we naively go into things and kind of sweep things under the rug. And those things can become irritants. What's that saying? They say something along the lines of the things that you love about that person in the first year, the things that you end up in contempt and hate them for the rest of the relationship, right? Or something along those lines. Like, oh, you're so weird and unique. And then it's like, oh my God, you're so weird and unique. What is wrong with you? Can you stop and just be a normal human? So, but I think it's a combination. I also think, and I heard just recently from one of my clients, I learned so much from my clients. I'm so grateful for them. a gentleman said something along the lines of he had read in one of the books that he was reading about marriage, said something along the lines of, my wife has changed in every stage of our life, and I've just chosen to love the new woman that she becomes each time, right? And I was like, wow, that's wisdom, right? Yeah. I mean, if we could look at it that way, that we're always changing, we're always progressing, we're always growing. I know for sure I'm not the same person that I was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. And I'm sure you could say the same thing for yourself,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. And I hope not to be, right?
Right.
We hope we're not the same that we were.
Yeah, but that's probably, us as self-growth junkies, so.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I see it as a combination of both, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, how do you think, Haley, social media affects relationships? Does it?
You know what? I tell you what, I am going to be a very, very well-known woman if I can figure out how to fix this problem. I think technology gets ahead of us, and we don't really, it's so fast-moving that we don't realize the ramifications that it's going to have societally. And I think social media, because of the fact that we have access, so back in the day, you would hear things like, mid-century times, it would be an affair with the secretary or an affair with the milkman, right? Because of proximity. You didn't have the ability to have contact with someone across the world. You could get on Facebook or Instagram right now, and I could talk to somebody in China, right? It in many ways, I believe social media devalues the level of intimacy. Everything's out there that you can create within what was only kept for an intimate relationship. Mm-hmm. In fact, you do see people on social media that you go, oh God, oh no, something's not good. Right. Like you can just see it. You're like, oh no. You want to private message them and go like, okay, I get it, but find somebody to talk to because like it's starting to look bad. Mm-hmm. So I think that social media can be very damaging. Again, bringing it back to customizing something that works for each couple individually. It's a unique, some people care about likes on a picture. Some people could care less about social media. Some people have social media. I see some people together that one of them doesn't even has a flip phone still. You know what I mean? Like is not interested in it at all and doesn't have that dynamic. I think that it can have like for you and I, social media in many ways is free marketing, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So for us, it's necessary. I think it's important to ensure that your significant other feels safe with what you're doing on social media while still acting as an independent party and showing up in your own shine, Yeah. We have to take a quick look at whether or not it's because you can tell when it's for attention. You can tell when somebody's single. Like energetically, we can tell that, or newly single, I guess I would say. We can tell all of that. So I think, again, it's a conversation to determine what works for your partner while still staying out of the area of codependency and enabling. Mm-hmm. So you have to have your individuality as well. So again, communication. I think it can be used for a positive thing, and I think it can be a negative thing as well.
Sure.
But I do think that if I can figure out a way to, just like I did with the couples recovery, how to just break it down in a very systematic way, it'll be a good thing.
Okay, I like it. And that's true. It really, again, the bottom line is it always boils down to communication. What are your rules around this? What are you both comfortable with? What do you agree that's okay and that's over the line?
Right.
Yeah. So, okay, what do most people do? A lot of couples come in trying to avoid something. What are they? I'm sure you talk a lot about boundaries, which, we just talked a little bit about that with regards to social media. What else do you think it's important to mention when it comes to boundaries, accountability, what people need to, what measures do they need to put in place so that everybody feels safe and protected? I was talking a couple weeks ago about literally looking at your relationship like it's a cocoon. So it's very protected. It's in its own special, veil. And there's just certain things and people that never get to pierce that veil, that protective cocoon. And that should be, like a Fabergé egg. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
no,
so,
that's brilliant.
yeah. So what are your thoughts about that? And just, what things do they need to be sure to avoid? Just, yeah.
Well, so healthy boundaries and accountability, I believe, work within the relationship, and then what we decide, like you said, outside of the relationship. I often use the analogy that you don't often go looking for food or go to the grocery store if your pantry's full, right? Mm-hmm. So and the pantry being obviously analogous to the relationship. If the emotional needs are met, the physical needs are met, the financial is communicated between the kids and parenting, that's a clear agreement. Whether or not they're kids or their pets or plants, like, it doesn't matter. Like, there's a unity. We can become very protective over that. It's when we put other things and prioritize other things above that, or we get a little bit too in our own space, like I had mentioned in my own personal experience, acting very independently and not seeking. I always say, you know what, if you spend time and really look at that individual as this prize and seeking to know what they need, and they do the same thing and lean into you, if you're making sure that their needs are being met and they're making sure that your needs are being met, nobody's left empty-handed.
Right. Yes.
So I think that leans into just a natural byproduct would be healthy boundaries. People don't generally think about this. Okay, so if you think about a work environment, and there are happily married people that are there without their spouses working, and then there's unhappily married people. Those happily married people, those people that have, their pantry's empty or it's half full, they'll seek to have a conversation and commiserate about their relationship, which then creates an emotional bond between the two of them, which in my opinion would be emotional infidelity, because you are not, like you said, it's a cocoon. Those conversations are not for another person who is unhappy in their relationship. So emotional infidelity will then kind of move into a physical and so on and so forth. It's kind of the gateway into the rest of it. So I think that if we think about it that way, rather than somebody impeding our independence, then we can actually make the choice to be covetous of the relationship. There's a grand safety and sanctity within your relationship that isn't there in single life. So I think that from the outside, we just make sure that the pantry's always full. Ultimately, it's like, let's always go through the grocery list. Let's continue to go, okay, are your needs met? Are my needs met? Just over-communicate almost.
Right. Yeah, it's true, because it's easy to lose sight of that. And I love that analogy of the pantry. I think that's brilliant. And you're right, because we all have the same basic needs, but we all need to understand how our partner wants their needs fulfilled too, so that because they're not the same way. We don't use the same vehicles to fulfill our needs.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, Loree. Yeah. So that's another reason I do the love languages. Is because we speak different languages. Your partner could be sitting there, Loree, your husband could be like buying you all these gifts and sending you notes and sending you flowers, and you're like, all this stuff is going in the trash eventually. Like,
Right.
I don't know why and he's trying to say, and I have couples come in and they're like, I buy her everything she could ever desire. She has everything materially that she could ever want. And it's like, is that how she communicates or how she receives love?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're speaking Mandarin to her. It doesn't matter. She's not going to understand.
Yeah, this poor one's probably going, you know what? I don't need flowers and chocolate and diamonds and houses.
Right.
But I would love it if you'd pick up the fucking vacuum and clean the carpet.
Right.
That would make usually me feel loved.
Right? Could you take out the freaking trash?
Right? Yeah, without me even having to ask, right? Like acts of
Right.
service. That's like my big thing. If you couldn't.
Is it?
That, right? Yes.
Is it? Okay.
Service is my number one. When you
Very
do stuff,
interesting.
Yeah, when you do stuff like that, acts of service is to me that says you're paying attention to the things that are important to me, and and how I operate and how I thrive in my environment. And when you do those things, I am like, oh my God, that meant so much to me. So acts of service,
Right.
and then kind of as a sister to that is, don't make more work for me. Don't make more work for me, because it's kind of the same thing. So that's funny. Learning the love languages is fascinating, and it is life-changing, I think, for couples.
Right. So with the Myers-Briggs, I agree with you 100%. With the Myers-Briggs, it kind of just shows, okay, this is who I am as a person. It can be adjusted to some degree, but this is who I am as a person. With the love languages, it helps us to, I feel like it's almost like a kindling on a fire. It'll get you on the other side of conflict in a constructive way. That's another focus that we always focus on in the couples recovery is it solution oriented? Is it constructive conflict resolve? And if it isn't, table it, pause. But with the love languages, it can be a very quick I love you. Because think about how that makes you feel. The minute that your husband, picks something up or he takes the trash out or whatever it is, you're like, he's not that bad. A few minutes ago, you're going, oh my God, I swear to God, what was I thinking? What was I even thinking? How many years have I invested? You're just going straight down a spiral. And then they speak in your language and you're like, oh, never mind. I love them,
Yeah.
Right. So I teach the couples their love languages, which ones they have that are common, and so to use that. But if they want to go above and beyond and want to really speak and really fill that pantry, you use yours being acts of service. My number one is physical touch. So it's like if somebody gives me a hug, I immediately melt. I'm like, okay, never mind. I'm not mad anymore.
So physical touch for you.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's fun. It's a brilliant process. It really is. So, okay, Haley, what would you say for those who just haven't done anything yet and they're finding themselves in troubled water? What tips would you give them? Like some first steps?
First steps for couples, Loree?
Yeah.
My website is haleyhallock.com.
And that too.
My phone number is yes. Honestly, first steps, you need help. The patterns don't change. I mean, unless you're really evolved, the patterns usually don't change. It's kind of like the way that I see subconscious reprogramming, right?
Yeah.
You already have a negative pattern. The negative pattern and the bruises are there. And so you either have to be two very evolved individuals and be able to get above your biology, get above that amygdalic hijacking and all of the bruises that have happened in that process, or you need somebody to create some level of objectivity. I know getting help sucks. I was on an island for a long time and have been doing this, doing counseling and stuff like that for a really long time, and the self-help and coaching and stuff like that for a really long time. but I was a hypocrite, and I was on an island for a long time. At this point, will never go without some level of coaching, therapist, help on some level. So number one, first step, you need help. You need to talk to somebody, even if it doesn't seem that severe. And in fact, for the professional side of things, please come before it feels that severe. It makes our jobs easier.
Yeah. Don't wait until the house is on fire. If you smell smoke,
exactly.
Do something.
Exactly. Oh, never mind. It's fine.
It'll go away.
It's just a garage. We'll get a new one.
Totally. Oh my God. It won't reach me over here. Yeah.
I'm over here in the bedroom. It's probably fine. Yeah. No, first steps is always get help. And another thing that I say is please don't try to get that help from family. Family and friends have a bias, whether or not they want to admit it or not. They have a bias towards you or to your spouse. And when you discuss those kinds of things about your significant other with family and friends, what ultimately ends up happening is there's a little bit of a breach in confidentiality within the couple. I always say don't throw your spouse or partner under the bus because you'll forgive them. And your family and friends won't.
Yeah.
They're watching, and they want to protect you, and they want you to have the best in the world. And that's love, and it's good intentions, but it's just not for that dynamic. You have to talk to somebody who has nothing but your best interest, both people's best and the marriage's best interest, or relationship's best interest at heart.
Yeah, someone that can be totally objective. I mean, you're right. The well-intentioned family and friends can really be destructive and disruptive. And it's not fair because they're only hearing your side, and that there's always two sides, So
exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
For sure.
Good advice. So get help, number one. Number two, don't get it from friends and family.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Okay, and then at the top of that list of get help is, let's take a minute now for you to tell everyone where they actually can find you. What are the best places?
Yeah, actually, I do the vast majority of my advertisements through Psychology Today. So if you look up Psychology Today, Preferred Therapist, Cave Creek, or Haley Hallock, it will pull up my profile. You can read more about who I am, what I'm about. It'll link you to my website, which is haleyhallock.com, and that will go through and speak to information concerning the couples recovery, the bunch of other intensives that I have available, trauma intensive, kids intensive, and then just individual sessions using whatever it is that the client needs, whether it be Psych K, hypnotherapy, coaching, whatever it is. So those are the two best places.
Perfect. Okay, my final question for you, Haley, is what would you like to share with our listeners about the value of really shifting and going rogue?
I think that, like I said in the beginning, that's kind of like that is what I embody. I think that shift and change is absolutely 100% necessary. What I would say is don't wait until it's so bad that you take a nosedive. The value is I would say the value in shifting is that it's always happening, it's always necessary. Do it sooner than later is probably my advice about going rogue for sure. Continue to, but do it soon. Use wisdom.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we finally got to have a conversation.
I know. Now we have to get together and have a wine eventually.
I know. Well, as soon as I get myself on back down there to Cave Creek, Arizona, I will absolutely be knocking on your door, and we'll do it. I would love to.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It seriously is a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you so much. Great stuff. Really valuable stuff. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Haley. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, my friends. Well, that was a ton of really good stuff. I know that you're going to get a lot out of it. Haley is amazing, and she has got some fantastic methodologies. I am definitely going to be having her back on. There's a ton more that we can share. But I really hope that you loved what you heard today. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And a rating would be great too. Your comments are also very welcome. I love reading them. If you're trying to make some shift happen in your life and you would like to find out what private coaching with me is all about, you can learn more on LoreeBischoff.com or We'reTalkingShift.com. And of course, you can connect with me on any of the social media platforms. Thank you for listening, everybody. I love you guys. And until we talk again next week, stay feisty, my friends, and go make some shift happen. That goes for you too, Gary V.
The preceding podcast was a TJ DeSantis production. Comments, questions, and inquiries can be directed to DeSantisProd@gmail.com.